Well, hey guys, let me just say before I introduce our special guest this morning, we are heading towards the end of 2024. And if you are wanting to set your new year, hard to believe 2025 up, you want to set 2025 up for success, I want to give you an opportunity to join a couple of the new Finding Traction groups that I'm starting in January of 2025. The first one will be Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific time. That's Wednesdays at 8 o'clock Central p.m. or 9 o'clock Eastern time. We are starting a brand new group. We're going to walk through the Finding Traction course together. 52 weeks, the first full year of your recovery. And I invite you to join. It would be great to have you. What a great way to start the year. And the second group I'm starting is more of a specialist group. If you are in nonprofit ministry or you're a pastor or clergy and you're looking for a safe place to talk to fellow strugglers in the same place you are, we're going to be starting a group Thursdays at, let's see, what time will it? Yeah, it'll be 7 a.m. That will be 7 a.m. Pacific or 10 a.m. Eastern. So if either one of those two groups interest you, or you just want to connect with me and talk about what those groups look like, you can reach out to me at bandofbrothers.care at gmail.com. So here's the intro, and then a welcome to our special guest this morning.
Ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, guys, I am so excited this morning to introduce a fellow Canadian from the other side of the country, Sathiya Sam. So welcome to the podcast, Sathiya.
Hey, thanks for having me, Vern.
Hey, tell me a little bit your cultural background. I'm always curious. We live in such a multicultural country. Tell us just a little bit of your background.
Yeah, so I am really a first generation Canadian. My parents are both Indian.
Okay.
Dad born and raised in India, mom born and raised in Malaysia, actually, although genetically she is Indian.
Okay.
Dad moved to Canada in the 70s. He immigrated with his family. He
Okay.
was 18, and my
Oh,
dad
wow.
knew from about the age of 8 that he wanted to be a pastor. He used to force his siblings to sit down in the backyard and he would pretend to be a pastor and preach to them. And that's because my grandpa, his father was a pastor, as was his father. So
Oh,
a bit
wow.
of a lineage there. And my dad came to Canada. He did his studies and he got ordained. And in those days, when you got ordained, the denomination basically told you where you were going to start pastoring. You didn't have a
Okay.
say in the matter.
Yep.
So he got put in the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan,
Oh,
a
my.
small little town of 300 called Kincaid,
Yep.
and obviously was not meeting any women. He actually threw a couple ads out in the classifieds, if people remember those days,
Yeah.
to try to meet somebody. Didn't get any bites. So he told my grandpa, he told his dad, he said, "Hey, I got 6 weeks off this summer. Let's go back to India and find me a wife." Arranged marriages are obviously very cultural there.
Mhm.
And so my mom was second ranking among applicants because she was born in a more developed country. So she was more
Okay.
likely to be okay moving to Canada. And so the first person that they met with didn't quite work out. They met with my mom. They spoke for about 10 minutes. Everything was a go. My dad says that he asked two questions. And the first question was, are you okay moving to Canada? And the second was, can you cook? And my dad's rendition of the story is that my mom lied about both and said yes.
Okay.
Um,
Oh,
but
boy.
they got married and then they moved over and yeah, now I have kids of my own, or I have a
Yeah.
kid of my own and
Yeah.
hope to have more. And so one of those decisions that has literally altered generations and an entire lineage for us.
Absolutely. Well, I want to get into a few of your Canadian bona fides here, not to question you. I was just accused recently from a certain fellow coach in Chicago that I say certain words incorrectly. Like I said, trust the process, and he mocked me. And
Process, yeah.
yeah, do you say process or process
I,
or
s- I can't figure some of this stuff out. So I say process,
okay?
but I think I used to say process when I lived in Saskatchewan. I think in Ontario we say it differently than
Oh
in the
wow.
West.
Oh,
There's a bunch of stuff like that. Like we don't say supper here really. We say dinner mostly.
okay.
There's like, yeah, there's a bunch of things like that.
Well, I was mocking a fellow from Texas. We were in a workshop, and he said this comment. He was talking about the value of community, and he said the strength of the wolf is in the pack, and the strength of the pack is in the wolf. And we looked at each other and go, "What is a wolf?" And he said,
Yeah.
a wolf, something that howls." And we go, "You mean a wolf?" Yeah, a wolf. And so
Oh
it's
man. You know what? I went to a very international ministry school and we had a
okay.
very strong presence from the UK.
Yeah.
And I felt like we went through the same thing. It was like, you don't go to the bathroom, you go to the loo.
Yes.
And there's all this kind of stuff that like we were just constantly ragging on each other.
Right. And
Yeah.
apparently a boot is something in
A
the back of
boot.
your car. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. A boot is the trunk. Yeah. Or if you're
Ex
Canadian, that's how you say about, right? Like,
which
yeah.
I never did, but that's besides the point. Well,
Yeah.
one of the things Canadians are accused of is somehow being small in their vision, and I was looking over some of the stuff you had written, and I just want to read this because this does not at all um, true of you. So let me just read a couple things, and I want to have you talk about your story a bit. But let me read this. Sam is an architect of mature masculinity. Sathiya Sathiya guides men to overcome addictive behaviors by connecting with their faith, healing childhood trauma, building authentic identity, and mastering emotional regulation. Now, that's a big mouthful, but then it goes on. It says Sathiya wants to empower 100 million men to reach their full potential and liberate themselves by breaking free from dependencies, limiting beliefs, fear, and shame. Now, there's got to be a story behind that, Sathiya, why that thing energizes you. Can you just share a little bit of your story as to why you've made that your life mission?
Yeah, so we actually set this up very nicely. I grew up in a pastor's home
Hmm.
to two Indian immigrants, amazing people,
Yep.
the same off the stage that they were on the stage kind of deal. So everything was set up for me to make pretty good decisions in life, and
Hmm.
I fell into pornography in the computer lab of my Christian school. That was where I
Okay.
was first exposed. I was 11 years old.
Oh my.
And I didn't become addicted overnight. In fact, I would describe that first experience mostly as disgust with about 10% intrigue.
Okay.
Like I was prepubescent, so I was mostly
Hmm.
mortified by what I had seen. I was pretty sheltered up until that point, but obviously some intrigue as well.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until maybe a couple years later that I really started to develop more of a curiosity and interest in pornography, in
Right.
sexuality, and all that kind of stuff. And by the time I was in university, my early mid 20s, that's when I was really properly addicted.
Okay.
And I was studying biology. So my initial goal in life was to become a psychiatrist. I was very brainy,
Hmm.
really good with maths and sciences, had good people skills. And so medicine was a natural avenue. I also lost a few friends to suicide. That's not necessarily a huge part of my story
Hmm.
in what I do now, but I lost three friends to suicide in high school. So had a natural proclivity towards mental health and conquering
Right.
mental illness and all of that. And in the mid, I was working in a lab. I was in a very atheistic environment. I had all these research grants to conduct university
Hmm.
research, studying, and it was in an atheistic environment where I really found God. That was
Mm.
where I really decided to become a Christian because everything that I had believed up until that point was being mocked. And I
Right.
was trying to figure out, okay, do I actually believe this stuff? That's sort of where like, the baton got passed from my parents to me.
Sure.
And I knew that when I made my commitment that I had to clean up a couple things in my life. And chief among those things was my habitual use of pornography. And like any good addict, I told myself I could quit when I want.
Yep.
And that turned out to not be the case. And
Mm.
I really, I hit a wall early. It became very apparent to me early on, whoa, I thought this was just a bad habit I had to curb.
Right.
And it was starting to feel like this is more of a compulsion, maybe even an addiction. I wasn't really fully ready to admit it at that point.
Right.
But it did get me searching for some help.
Hmm.
And that's where the answer to your question really comes in because when I looked at what was out there, there was nothing. I mean, no one was really talking about it. And the people
Right.
that were, they just told you to, talk to your pastor, get an accountability partner, and slap on an internet filter, and you should be good to go. So, in my earnest zeal for
Yep.
integrity and to get this out of my life, I did all those things and basically found myself back in the same place, right? You're laughing
Right.
because you know exactly how this story
That's
goes.
right.
And I think that's when I realized, number one, whatever people are putting out there is not useful because it didn't
Hmm.
help me. And I wasn't the only person who had this experience that I knew of. But I think secondly, it just made me realize there's got to be more. There's got to be more to this story than just you pray to God and he delivers you and you're good to go. And not
Right.
that I'm against those stories, it wasn't my story.
Right.
And so I had this little prayer while I was in recovery, Vern. This prayer was, God, if you help me figure this out, I will do everything in my power to help as many men as possible figure that out as
Huh.
well. And so when I had my last relapse in February 2016, I didn't know it was my last relapse at the time. And I had
Yep.
gone, at that point, I had gone a year or two prior, at certain points in my life, not a year or two, a year or I think 18 months was the longest I had gone, and I'd fallen back into it. So I was very cautious, very guarded. And I was actually just kind of enjoying walking in freedom and focusing on other things. And it was in the fall of 2018 that God sort of began to give me this nudge of like, hey, remember that prayer? It's time. It had been about 2.5 years, and I really did feel different than the other times, even when I had longer periods. And so December 2018 is when we launched Deep Clean. And I just knew when I launched Deep Clean, I knew I wasn't the only person. And I would have been very fortunate if I could even just reach a handful of people. And at the
Right.
same time, the stats are all out there. Like we all
Yep.
know, there's millions upon millions, really billions of people that are watching pornography on a regular basis. And so to me, even setting the goal of impacting 100 million men it's a big number. And at the same time, in relative terms, it doesn't seem that outrageous because we know how many people are struggling and just how little awareness there is of people like you and I who are providing these more holistic solutions. So that's a little bit of the backstory and
Yeah.
why I'm so passionate about what I do.
And your book is called, is it Your Last Relapse? What's the name of the book
The
that you
last relapse.
the last
Yeah.
relapse that you'd written? I remember I know I haven't gone through it recently, but just ding 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 when you had said that. Now, let's back up for a second. Let's see, somebody's listening to this. They found it and they're going, "You know what? I sure I have porn in my life, but I'm not quite sure that it's affecting me that strongly. Recently, for example, I picked up Jonathan Haidt's book, which is called The Anxious Generation, which is all about
Yeah.
the effects of social media, and that is kind of opening people's eyes. And more recently, there's been a couple news stories. Even Saturday Night Live mocked this news story, basically that health and education specialists are now starting to say, oh my goodness, we have to have a serious talk with young men about the effects that porn is having on a whole generation of emerging men. And
Yeah.
I know that men is your real jam here, but can you maybe talk briefly to somebody who is maybe hearing this and going, okay, what is the largest or the most significant impacts that you experience that porn is having on the emerging generation of men in our society?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll give a little bit of a backstory. I
Mhm.
became a father in October 2023, and I had the chance to just I took about 4 or 5 weeks off to just be with the family and sort of enjoy that new season. And God really started talking to me when I was off. Like I think my brain just got a bit of a reset.
Hmm.
I was a little bit more open, and it's sometimes when you're not trying to find these ideas and revelations that you get
Hmm.
them. And one of the things I realized, and I really see this in your work and what you do as well, Vern, is I realized that I'm not actually in the business of helping guys quit pornography. I'm in the business of helping men become everything that God made them to be so they can go and change the world. And
Hmm.
it sounds like a little bit of like this euphemistic idea, but
Right.
actually, um, I was looking at the stories. I was hearing about the guy who became a better husband to his wife, and he started to have healthier conversations with his kids, and he was able to help his kids avoid getting into the porn trap. And I was hearing about the guy who got confidence from quitting pornography, so he went and started a business, and was able to carry out his lifelong dream to build something that he always wanted to. I was just realizing, like, man, when guys quit pornography, they go out and they change the world. And I think when I think about the most debilitating parts of pornography, it's not just in the addiction. It's not just like, oh, I have this addiction, it's wasting all this time, and I feel bad about my integrity. That's part of it, but it's the ripples. It's
Hmm.
because I have pornography in my life, my marriage is a 6 out of 10 when it could be a 10 out of 10.
Right.
I'm doing okay at work, but I know that if I had a clearer mind and if I was channeling some of these resources into my own development, I'd probably be making more, getting more promotions, having more impact and influence in the company.
Sure.
The amount of guys we have who want to volunteer at church and serve and, really give back, but they can't because they have this fear of being found out and being a hypocrite. There's a lot of guys that fall in that category. And so I think, we are particularly effective with professional men in that kind of 25 to 45 age range. And in the younger component of that demographic, we're seeing a lot of anxiety, just like Jonathan Haidt writes
Hmm.
about, a lot of poor skill development in having conversations with other people.
Yep.
But then, especially when it comes to having conversations with the opposite sex,
Yes.
on a coaching call today, I had somebody ask me, like, I've been in pornography for so long, I'm finally starting to break free and I'm feeling ready to explore a relationship, but I don't know how to start. I'm so afraid of being rejected
Right.
because pornography kind of sent in this message that you don't have to risk rejection. You can just have pornography and, there's zero barrier to entry and you get what you want when you want it. And
Hmm.
so I think those are some of the effects that we're really seeing. There isn't that resilience built up within them to really take risks in life, especially I would say in romantic relationships, but even beyond that. And conversely, guys are taking more risks and they're trying to put themselves out there more, whether it's vocationally or in their marriage or otherwise, when they do quit pornography.
Well, it's interesting because you seem to be saying, many of the costs are actually hidden. The old days, I remember an old sex addiction therapist said, if you're addicted to sex and porn, it's going to cost you $300,000. And most guys go, oh, it's not going to cost me that because I get all my porn for free or very, you know, like I'm if you're paying for the internet, other than your internet, provider, you're a failure at porn or you're a failure. But you're describing something which is a little more hidden, which is a little more subtle. It's all of those costs that having you on your back foot, all of, having you in passive mode in your life,
Yeah.
or having on your life. Recently, one of a brand new guy that I've been coaching, he went to his therapist, and his therapist was a little bit um, not skeptical, but he was probing him about what I'm doing with him in the group, which is good. I enjoy
Sure.
working with therapists, and his therapist was kind of pressing. Okay, is this guy referring to me? Is this guy only about you trying to stop looking at porn? Is that all this guy's doing? And was basically saying and probing what you're asking is that what he's doing? Because, dude, there's way more to it than simply not looking at porn.
Yeah.
And that's where you're going. You're saying if this is simply we want to stop looking at porn, what a small view for your life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, like, when that's the goal, then you can resort to internet filters and
Hmm.
street counting. And I'm going to donate to charity every time
Right.
I view pornography
Yes.
because yeah, you're just trying to change the behavior. But when you have more of a roots-based approach, this is really about undergoing an entire transformation, like you becoming a different person. And the byproduct of that transformation is that you don't watch porn, right? And
Hmm.
I think those it sounds small, but that shift is really that's the difference maker. And I think that's why I love the show, and that's why I like what you're doing. And I think your message needs to get out more because more people need to hear about this because we've been so led astray to just reduce pornography to like it's a bad behavior and just replace it with something better. It's so much more than that.
Right. Well, one of the things you talked about, in terms of that you love working with men is you describe the idea of overcoming not just addictive behaviors, but dealing with limiting beliefs, dealing with some of the very belief structure that men have that limit them. Can you talk a little bit more about where you see, how you see men's limiting beliefs standing in the way of where they want to end up?
You cannot outbehave your beliefs. So
Okay.
if you have bad behavior, it is evidence of bad beliefs. And the limiting beliefs are not what we think they are. We
Okay.
think limiting beliefs are like I can't make $1 million and I can't do whatever. The
Hmm.
limiting beliefs are, I'm not good enough. If somebody saw who I really was,
Right.
they would hate me. They wouldn't love me. I'm not good I'm not worthy. I'm not valuable. My value is dependent on my performance. Like I said, we work with a lot of high achievers and top
Hmm.
performers and athletes. Very, very common belief system. Those belief systems often fuel our behaviors. And in the right environment, there could be some strength there. Like, if your value is equated in your performance, you want to perform more so that you feel better about yourself. And we can kind of
Hmm.
see how that could drive an athlete or a medical doctor to be at the top of their game. But in a recovery context, it just doesn't work because it means every time you fall short, you feel bad about yourself, you're going to want to cover up. And so the whole premise here is if we can address these limiting beliefs and really establish a sense of self that is anchored in truth, capital T,
Yeah.
then your behaviors will also start to change. And it's exactly what we talked about before. It's just rather than making the behaviors the actual focus, let's just see them as a byproduct. Let's get to the more systemic element, which is the bad beliefs, the faulty beliefs, the things that are rooted more or less in lies. If we can address those, then the behaviors will start to take care of themselves.
Yeah, I think it's the philosopher Michael Novak that talks about we will never act in a way that violates our core beliefs. It's our
Mm,
core beliefs which actually informs what we do,
yeah,
not our stated beliefs or the beliefs we present in public, but
right.
actually our true operating system, right? In
Yeah,
terms of,
yeah. What's the famous story? Was it Enron that had integrity up on the wall as one of their core values,
yes,
right? But then meanwhile, they were, committing all kinds of fraud and treason. So I think that's a really good distinction. You can say what you believe, but you'll show me what you believe more than anything else.
yeah. Well, I love the fact that you were describing men that begin to change the way they believe. They begin to change their relationship with perhaps technology. They change their relationship with pornography, and as a result, they begin to act out more of their or live into more of their God created potential.
Yeah.
Just describe for me maybe um, just some of the men that you work with, some of the changes that you see, and how I love the idea of tipping point. It's another Malcolm Gladwell's concept of when men reach a tipping point, they
Yeah.
actually begin to experience momentum in their development and growth. Just share with me just some of the examples of just guys that you see reaching a tipping point in recovery and what effects that has on their life.
Yeah, so two stories come to mind right away. One is a guy named Manny, and he's given us permission to use his name and share a story. But Manny's, married, kids,
Hmm.
successful engineer, and struggled with pornography. It was really starting to erode his marriage. And his wife didn't say, this is your last chance, but was kind of saying like,
Right.
something's got to shift, something's got to give. His tipping point, like we have three pillars of recovery. They're building
Hmm.
self-awareness, healing of the heart, and shifting your identity.
Okay.
So for him, the big component was actually building self-awareness. So here's a left-brained engineering type, very
Hmm.
logical, very
Yep.
analytical, not a great understanding of the inner world, emotions and thoughts
Hmm.
and perceptions and beliefs. And so for him, building that awareness was really empowering. It was giving him a sense of control over the situation because he could say, "Oh, I'm feeling stressed about work,
Right.
and if I can mitigate my stress now, if I can regulate myself and whatever, process the stress, then I know I will prevent myself from going down that path that eventually leads to a relapse." So a huge one for him. And the really cool thing, we just recorded his story a couple weeks ago,
Hmm.
and he was telling me about how he's talking to his brother about it. He's
Okay.
talking to his cousins about it. So his family is starting to say like, "Hey, dude, you look different. Like, what's the deal?" And he's like, "Well, I haven't been telling people, but here's the program I've been in. Here's something
Yeah.
I've been going through." And I love that. The stories where like people have a platform and they can share. I love those stories too.
Hmm.
But I actually love it when it's like, man, I'm talking to my brother about stuff that I never used to talk to him about.
Hmm.
That's a lasting relationship now that has a completely different dimension to it. And that kind of stuff gets us really fired up. And now his brother is starting to like ask questions about how he can get free and thinking about what he needs to do to, step into freedom. So it's that kind of story is really exciting for us. Another one, this story has been really interesting, but we're hearing more about this lately, and this is the impact that getting free of porn has on the body.
Hmm.
So I mentioned I was a university researcher. There's this
Yep.
really interesting study that came out a few years ago that showed men who view pornography are more likely to develop eating disorders. And
Oh, interesting. Okay.
the linking piece was body dysmorphia. So guys are watching porn, they're feeling insecure about their own bodies, physical bodies, but also their, specific anatomy.
Yep.
And it's causing these eating disorder behaviors. They're more likely to binge purge with food and avoid food altogether, all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So one of the things we've been seeing on the other side of it is that when guys quit pornography, they start taking better care of their bodies. I did
Right.
an event with some clients in the summer, and there was one guy, and I saw him. I hadn't seen him in a while, and I was like, "Dude, you look jacked." He's like,
Hmm.
"Yeah, I started lifting weights and that kind of stuff." So we're hearing these stories, but we had one guy report back to us. He was a missionary.
Hmm.
He's been clean of pornography for 18 months since he,
Okay.
finished working with us. Part of that overlaps when he did work with us, but it's been 18 months.
Hmm.
And in those 18 months, Vern, he's run 2,200 miles.
Oh my.
So he started getting into ultra
Hmm.
marathons. And so he actually completed a couple, but with the ultra marathons plus the training, he's
Yeah.
run 2,200 miles. And this is a mission. He's got 7 kids. He lives in Africa.
Oh
And
wow.
he was actually about to get sent home over his porn addiction.
Hmm.
So because he's quit pornography, more people are going to hear the gospel. He's going to be a better role model to his 7 kids.
Hmm.
And now he's taking better care of his body. He's running ultra marathons, kind of like achieving the unthinkable, what would have been impossible for him a couple of years ago.
Right.
So those are like the things that I love. It's awesome that he's not watching pornography. That's the biggest thing for sure. But you can see there's a bunch of other dominoes that start to fall as well.
Okay, let me go back to that triangle you talked about. I found that fascinating. You talked about with the first guy, the three pillars, self-awareness. What was the second one?
Healing of the heart,
Healing of the heart. Okay, and the third one,
shifting your identity.
shifting your identity. Can you describe to me just a little bit of how those three work in not tandem, but how they work together? I'd love to
Yeah.
hear a little bit of the model that you guys use.
Yeah, so let's go backwards because I actually believe those 3 pillars should be done in order.
Okay.
So let's say we start with shifting your identity, our third pillar,
Okay.
and I tell you, okay, Vern, you've had this history of watching pornography, but you are not an addict. That's not your
Mhm.
identity anymore. You're probably not going to believe me. Like it sounds exciting, and we can
Yeah.
definitely get excited about this addiction-free identity,
Hmm.
but there's no substance there, or not enough substance for you to actually undergo a transformation
Hmm.
because you may not, the next time that you're triggered, you can tell yourself, well, that's not who I am anymore. But it may not give you the level of control that you need to exude over that temptation or over that trigger.
Right.
So identity is very important, but for us, it's last. The other thing that can often get in the way, if all we did was shift your identity, the other thing that could be at play is you have some traumas, some parts from your childhood. Now, traumas is not just you got in a car accident and you were sexually abused and your house burned down when you were 3 years old.
Hmm.
Trauma can also just be sometimes trauma is not about what happened to you, it's about what didn't happen to you.
Right.
It's the caregiver that didn't show love. It's the person that didn't give you that affirmation that you needed or that confidence. It's maybe the dad who didn't really roughhouse with you, and so you felt insecure about your body. Like
Hmm.
there's all kinds of different things that can factor into this. But if we don't address the trauma, what happens is I can say, yeah, you have this new identity, but you actually can't detangle from the old parts of your damaged identity, as it were, because the
Okay.
trauma kind of is sealing everything in. So there's an order to this for a very specific reason. You build self-awareness first because if you are not aware, it cannot be repaired. So
Right.
if we can acknowledge that porn addiction actually has roots that need to be tackled first, self-awareness is helping us label or identify the roots. And
Hmm.
so this is a skill that needs to be built to experience recovery, but it's also a skill that sustains you on the other side. I guarantee you, Vern, you have a refined sense of self-awareness of what's going on within you because
Hmm.
of the work you've put in. And so you can start to nip things pretty quickly in the bud before they develop into something worse, whether it's uncomfortable feelings, it's
Right.
some sort of thought that maybe you're getting plagued with. You can start to resolve those things really quickly. That self-awareness is necessary. You have to build the awareness first. Working through the traumas is kind of like loosening the dirt, as it were.
Okay.
It gives you a chance to understand what's going on underneath the surface, why it's there, and we really believe in forgiveness. We're big believers in a process called inner child work. Those are
Hmm.
the two things that we really emphasize that we believe lead to that shifting of the heart. The other kind of tagline we have for this pillar is changing your history.
Okay.
So this is where you get to kind of rewrite some of those damaging experiences. You get to invite God in, you get to reprocess them, and you get to really, I would say, anchor them back in truth. And that makes the shifting identity piece a lot easier. We don't believe in once an addict, always an addict. We really believe you can actually be a new creation. You can completely shift your identity and leave behind that old one. And the little adage we have for this third pillar is you reach in a place where you would rather be 100% yourself and rejected than 80% yourself and accepted. And so
Mm,
we're building this radical sense of I am who I am. I'm not apologizing for it. It doesn't mean I'm going to be a jerk to everyone, but it's
right.
just saying I know who I am and I'm going to own it. And I would even risk rejection if it meant that I could stay true to who I am. It's that kind of radical authenticity that we see gets built in men, and that's why you have a missionary who starts running 2,200 miles in 18 months because he wanted to do it. It's something he always wanted to do, but now
Hmm.
he's taking care of himself and he doesn't care if people don't get it or people are like, hey, that's a little bit extreme or whatever. It doesn't matter to him. He's going to be himself. He's going to do the things he wants to do, and he's not going to apologize for it.
Well, as I listen to your description, what comes to my mind is you're describing a man that is now secure, a man that is now confident, a man that partly because he's dealt with some of the things he needs to deal with, he's looked at his story, he's worked through that now, and he has tools, and he's not going to be blown over by the first trigger, the first strong wind that comes his way, and
Yeah.
is like, you know what? And the most important thing is he's now available to serve others. He's now available to give away because he's not so focused on his own needs and his own brokenness, right? And
Yes.
that's what you described as the ripple effect, which I love to hear. So, Sathiya, I know when I've gone on different podcasts, there's people that have heard me that have, then found me and began to connect with me because the way I say things or the way I do things, sometimes there's an affinity. There's like, you know what, that's what I need right now in my place of recovery. And there, you might be listening to this podcast and you're hearing Sathiya and you're going, you know what, I want to know more. I think he's speaking some of my language. He's got some keys that I feel I'm missing in my life. How can guys connect with you, Sathiya? Talk a little bit about what you do and how men can reach out to you.
Yeah, the best place we ask people to start is actually with our podcast. It's called The Man Within,
Hmm.
over 850 episodes. And so we've
Oh,
done a lot
wow.
of content on a lot of different things.
Hmm.
And a lot of we do a mixture of interviews and in solo casts where it's me teaching. And
Yep.
we have really informed the teaching components by the questions that we get from our audiences and from our clients. So chances are they've asked questions that you might be wondering as well, and you can get answers to all of that on the podcast. And I recommend people do a search, like what's the issue you're struggling with the most right now? What's the
Hmm.
thing you're confronted with that if you knew I could figure this out, then I can take a step forward. Go to our podcast page, do a search for it in your podcast player. You can do it on our website as well. That would be the best place to start. And then there's tons of other resources, but the podcast is kind of the gateway to all of them.
Yeah, and you've described back when you first started looking and reaching out, like me, you're going, there is nothing available.
Yeah,
And we are in a place right now where people like you and some things I've started and others, that there are some great resources. Uh,
definitely.
yeah, for sure. Sathiya, it's been a blessing having you on the podcast. I'm so enjoying getting to know you, and I got to go on yours as well, The Man Within. So we've had a great time. So God's blessing on what you're doing, and I pray that 100 million men would see that, would begin to change their lives, and the ripple effect would happen. So again,
Well,
thank you for coming on the show.
thanks for having me, Vern. It's a pleasure.